If your team has been unable to do unit walkthroughs over the last 10 months or so, you're definitely going to want to listen into this. Today we're going to talk about how COVID-19 lifestyles are escalating mold issues. Certified Indoor Environmental, Portland's mold remediation specialists, and Zach Howell from Bear Consulting have teamed up today to explain what is causing these issues and what property management teams need to be aware of. Hi, Zach. You have 21 years experience in building maintenance. Can you tell us, in your opinion, what is causing a rise in interior and attic mold problems today?
So I think it's just one of those things. As we look at our industry across the board, we've always sort of had this indoor, air quality issue. But as we think about it from a COVID standpoint, I think that it's exacerbating what is already sort of a common issue and potentially making it a more impactful issue, just because we do have constant, people living and staying in their homes 24 hours a day versus, leaving for the morning and coming back in the afternoon. So I think this topic is certainly timely, but I also think that it's just one of those things that our industry really needs to be aware of as they think about their occupancy, just from a day-to-day standpoint. And then obviously how that affects maintenance and how it affects just the operation of their units and the long-term preservation of their property.
Nick, as a project manager with Certified Indoor Environmental, you've gone into many units and attic spaces over the last few weeks. What are you seeing that is causing relative humidity to increase in the units?
The occupancy load is definitely going to be higher for longer periods of time than it would normally be if school was in session, and also if people weren't also working from home.
Not to mention the families, myself included, who, have had college students who are schooling now online and have come back home. So our occupants have increased. And maybe other family members who are out of jobs and on hard times and needing a place to stay, and they've been taken in to those units as well.
Zach, how are most maintenance requests being managed during COVID-19?
Sort of, predetermined by the residents' sort of ability to be comfortable, understand what's going to happen once our residents come in or once our staffing come in. So at the end of the day, you're sort of looking at that from really an operational efficiency to say, who's going to go in, when are they going to go in, what is that COVID protocol they're going to follow. And then sort of the second tier of that really is analyzing each of those work orders to say, is this a critical work order that needs to be addressed right now? So you have, habitability issues, you have potential life safety issues, you have other things like that that are driving that decision-making process. But at the end of the day, it really is to the point where we're just not accessing our units as commonly and as many times as we typically do. So we could have units that sit, again, since last March that may have never, none of our staff have been into for, what's going on 10 months now.
Hey, Mark, what are some specific examples causing moisture to increase in units?
A lot of places are setting up babysitting in these units. And so, they've got a lot more individuals in that unit throughout the day, just because there's no daycare. We were in a unit the other day, and they had 7 people actually living in the unit. And if you can imagine, these units aren't designed for 7 occupants, and all the moisture and cooking throughout the day and showering, that's putting so much moisture into the air. Some of the places we go into, looks like they're using it as a commercial kitchen because they're boiling water all day long and cooking. All that moisture is putting, moisture back up into the air. We're seeing that the bath fans aren't on a humidistat or a separate switch, so it's not able to pull that moisture out of the units. Some of the kitchen fans are ducted back into the units, so again, it's not pulling any of that moisture and getting it out of the structures.
Hey, Zach, how quickly, based on occupancy rates, can moisture accumulate in a unit and cause issues?
My standard is typically a family of 4 will produce close to 3 gallons of water a day.
Yeah.
And if anybody's ever put a dehumidifier in a unit and you got to dump that bucket at the end of the day, it's a lot of water. So if you, I mean, you have to understand that, like Mark's saying, I mean, if you have, most of these units are designed in a way and engineered in a way that there's an assumption that during the day, it will be unoccupied generally. So obviously you have shower in the morning, you have cooking in the evening. And so they're, again, you know, the systems are sort of designed to work that way. But if you have people that are just occupying these units 24 hours a day, even just a typical family of four, not to mention, you know, a daycare, that moisture is just going to be, you know, multiplied numerous times. And then you get into a situation where not only is the moisture being accumulated at such a rapid rate, the mechanical systems that are really designed to just work sort of temporarily to remedy these issues, they're getting pushed constantly. And so they're obviously not able to keep up with that, and they're starting to wear out earlier and earlier. And honestly, it's just one of those things, even from a maintenance standpoint, that we got to think about to say, you know, if that bath fan is our only true mechanical ventilation, it's getting pushed. Hopefully it's on. If it's not on, then that air is not going really anywhere. It's just stagnating in those units. And those people are obviously rebreathing that. And if there's moisture, there's going to be mold spores in the air, and there's going to be growth. It's just a fact of nature, especially in our region.
Nick, based on what Zach just mentioned, how are attics affected?
It definitely affects the attic space, especially if the attic isn't vented properly. If the attic isn't vented properly, the problem actually gets exaggerated. So because none of this dense moist air has anywhere to go, it's going there through stack effect. Anything that is moisture rich and warm is going to travel upwards. And if the attic is not adequately vented, then the problem within the apartment is going to be intensified. And then adding on to what Zach was saying, oftentimes when you see a severe mold issue within an apartment, the first question I ask is, are you running the heat? And the problem that they have is, I'm home 24 hours a day. I can't afford to run the heat that long. And so oftentimes they're not even running it. So it sometimes can be an issue of, hey, I have the resources to run the cadet heater, the baseboard heater, or I don't have the resources to run heat, and I just don't. I bundle up. I see both.
So you could have a perfectly ventilated attic up to the 1 by 150 code, and it won't make any difference if you've got so many people in those units cooking throughout the day. It'll overwhelm it, and you're going to have microbial growth up there.
Mark, what are some specific examples relating to ventilation concerns?
Now, one of the things that we're really seeing right now is a lot of roofing contractors are being called out because they think they have roof leaks. And when they get up into the attic, there's no roof leak. It is strictly a condensation issue. They're seeing that more this year than they've ever seen. And again, it's because we're overloading these units. So, you know, our roofing contracting partners calling us out there to look at the whole ventilation system, not just the attic situation, but what's the ventilation system inside the unit? I can't tell you how many times I go in there, Zach, and I see the fan is on a separate light switch. Always, constantly. Yeah. They're not using it, ever. No. It's noisy.
Zach, what do you think of that fan solution?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm a huge believer in taking that control completely out of the resident's hand. Yeah. I'd rather just have it hardwired, and that thing either kicks on when it reaches 60% relative humidity, or it's on all the time. Yeah. Because inevitably, you're right. I mean, residents won't use it. And again, that falls to our maintenance staff to say, you know, if that fan sounds like a jet airplane, nobody's going to use that. So it's up to them to lubricate the motors, making sure that they're working, which should be done on a pretty, you know, regular preventive maintenance schedule. But if that unit hasn't come vacant for 5 or 6 or 7 years or more, it probably hasn't been addressed. I mean, most of that is done via the vacant, you know, turnover process. Yeah. So if those residents have been living there for a long time, probably hasn't been addressed.
Is that a service that Certified offers, upgraded fans?
Yeah, they've really appreciated it because in addition to that, obviously we're taking care of remediating any visible growth that's there, getting that taken care of, and then upgrading that fan. And the likelihood that they'll need us back to do that remediation is pretty low at that point.
Zach, what about buildings that are sitting empty right now without any occupants?
We talked about it earlier, where you have sort of like these vacant buildings, whether it's a commercial space or something else. And again, you sort of have the extreme that Nick was talking about earlier, where all the utilities have been shut off because those owners are not paying to heat all that big space while it sits vacant.
Yep.
So you have, again, you sort of have this box that it has no airflow. It's dark, damp, cold. It's going through this sort of, daily freeze thaw cycle on its own. There's going to be growth in those spaces. I mean, that's just a given. So I think that could be a concern. I think just from because there are so many businesses shut down and because there is so much sort of vacant space, that could certainly be an industry problem, maybe on the commercial side. But yeah, I mean, that's sort of the other extreme, right? Where there's just no occupancy, there's nothing happening, and you just got a vacant building sitting out in the, in the world somewhere. It's going to happen. It's going to grow.
Zach, let's talk about some key solutions.
I mean, I think at the end of the day, like I've said this a million times, but the mold is just a symptom. You can't just get rid of the symptom. You have to get to the source of why that is there. And I know Mark, preaches this. Kim, we all preach this. But so many people, they're just like, I just want the mold to go away. Well, you can wipe it away today and wipe it away tomorrow, and you can keep wiping it for the rest of your life. But until you get to the source of that and figure out what that source is through investigation and through analysis and through all these other things, you're really not getting to the root of the problem. So that's a big one.
Mark, please tell us about certified, simplified, and discounted process for both single home and multifamily properties.
Same program for property management companies, where if they can give us a good thorough description of what the tenant's seeing or a photo with it would be preferable, we can send out, do our assessment and treatment at the exact same time. If it's something a little bit more complex, then we'll still write our assessment scope of work, and then we'll get that information to the site manager, portfolio manager, and then they can make a decision of when they want to do that scope of work. But it certainly alleviates going back in multiple times. It's one and done, and you're taking care of that customer, and you're getting, if there is any suspect microbial growth, you're getting that done and off that concern off the resident's plate immediately.
I love one and done. That's great. Hey, Zach, can you please share any solutions you have from a maintenance standpoint?
There are some really simple, probably low-cost solutions that they can do. One of the ones that I always typically, give folks is, look, if you can upgrade this fan, or if you can go with a humidistat sensor on the wall that's going to run your existing fan, you're talking about, $100 solution that could be a great solution to get you down the road, or maybe to the next refinance or something like that. I'm always explaining to people sort of, to cut the bathroom door so that when it's closed, your bath fan can still suck in air from around the unit. Things like that can be done for next to nothing, basically. Have your site staff do those things. People just don't realize that those are really simple things they can do. When we talk about, developing projects and building out of the ground, or even, large renovation projects, most people think, I'm going to reclad this whole thing, new windows, new siding, new roof. What they don't realize is as they close up that envelope, the indoor air quality is going to be affected, typically in a negative way, because the mechanical ventilation on the inside is just not designed to keep up with that, because it was used to having airflow sort of through the wall and through the fenestrations and windows and all these little areas where it's not very energy efficient, obviously, but as it relates to sort of airflow, it's great. So once we want this high efficiency, we have to address mechanical ventilation, and we have to, whether that's through, passive ventilation, through windows and things like that. But more importantly, I think just from a mechanical point of view, the ventilation properly, dedicated ventilation through the roof, tight lining of ventilation that's actually tight forever, hose clamps, things like that, versus just taping them up and hoping that they never fall down. Those are really simple things I think that owners need to just be aware of, and they should be doing as a best practice. But again, once they get to this point where it hasn't been dealt with, just to get to that step one requires mitigation of everything that's grown thus far. So again, I mean, it's an interesting approach, but I think just educate is, I think for us in this field, it's just it's constant. It's all the time.
Would owners of new buildings, within the last 1 to 5 years need to be as concerned?
There's a lot of outside money coming into Oregon, specifically Portland and Seattle, Northwest. And all those, I mean, I have 2 clients right now that are out of San Diego, and they got their people. And every time I look at some design, it is designed for San Diego or Arizona. Like, that's not going to work here in the Northwest. So, I mean, you really have to look at those things from a design perspective to say, it has to be built in a specific way. I always use this because we did an analysis years ago, but a typical 100 unit property is, just because of the annual rainfall, it's going to shed about 440,000 gallons of water annually. So you have sort of this condition that is just regional to us, that these buildings have to be built in a certain way that are going to take that into consideration. And if they're not, then it's going to show. It's just going to happen. And so it's amazing how these out-of-state folks sort of are surprised by that. But just because it's new, doesn't mean it's any damn good. It's one of the rules of maintenance. So,
Now there's a lot of them being still built with all the specs, the basic specs. There are some builders, and I'm sure Zach's familiar with those, and projects that are going up where they're really now taking note of this issue, especially here in the Northwest. And they're building out these new units with great ventilation plans. I've seen them firsthand myself, where they not only have these fans that are on the automatic humidistat, but the doors are cut. They have some other ventilation systems in the kitchen area. So they've really put some thought into it. And I think that's the future, should be the future of the design of these buildings, but I think we still have a ways to go.
Zach, what solutions can be managed during COVID-19?
I think the best scenario is to just use that excuse to say, look, we are here to do our annual unit inspections. And it's been a while. And during that inspection, the maintenance staff, I mean, really, if you can just pop your head into an attic with a decent flashlight, and if you know that there are, 8 fans, I'd like to see 8 ductings that go up to the roof. If I only see 5, then assume that there are 3 that are laying down in the insulation in the attic and that are just blowing hot air into that attic space, which is obviously, making it worse. And just start from that really basic approach. That, to me, that's just a no-brainer. It's super easy. And then again, sort of how do we strategize from there? That's where we would typically engage, with certified and say, okay, we do have this potential issue.
Mark, how can certified help owners reduce potential mold liability in the long run?
We do a lot of community-wide attic assessments, ventilation design. And I think the most important thing is bring us in early in the process, not after you've hired the roofing contractor who thinks they have a ventilation plan that's going to, make sure it's taking care of the moisture source. Too many times we're brought in secondary after the design of the ventilation, and then based on what we know from our experience, it's not going to be sufficient. And so you kind of have to start that process over again. So bring us in initially with your other vendors that you've chosen, so that we can put in a team approach to make sure that the issue is actually going to be addressed and resolved. The underlying issue of addressing that source of moisture, so that you never have to visit this again. And then lastly, it doesn't matter who does the work. You need to go up in those attics after you've done a major, renovation. You need to do that annually for the next 3 years, just to make sure whatever design was done actually is functioning and working correctly. Everybody believes they have the right solution, but you may have a situation where you have some tenant occupancy issues it's overwhelming, you've got to check those attics to make sure those mechanical changes actually perform.
And that would be true too for the interior. So not just the attic spaces, but as we're talking about these interior units, which goes back to those annual inspections. And if they need to have help with that, of course, as we mentioned earlier, taking photos, giving us a description of what's been going on, sending it over, our team can take a look at it and get a pretty good idea of what needs to be done as a next step.
Zach, what final tips do you have to help in mitigating risk?
The reality is, I think for multiple vendors in our area, and specifically in sort of the Portland market, really just they really do want to help, and they're willing to sort of make that that effort, you know, at the front end to say, yeah, I mean, let's meet, let's talk, let me look at it, send me some pictures. I will give you some free consulting. Let's talk about what's going on, and then from there, it's like, you know, my expertise from there, obviously, you know, it's going to cost you something, but at the end of the day, in the long run, the long play is that you are going to have something that is going to perform long term.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great comment. I mean, make sure it's being done right the first time. There's too many times that I see things being done from a design point where they really don't understand how to properly ventilate a multifamily, and all of a sudden the mold's coming back because they don't understand the whole approach of the building. And so that's where we kind of partner with everybody, with the roofing contractors, the HVAC contractors, to make sure that we're not going to have to deal with this issue down the road. So it is a science to properly ventilate some of these attic structures, so that you have that airflow and you're not dealing with these issues down the road. Lastly, I'd like to say thank you for Zach for being here. I'm going to tell you, I can't tell you how many roofing contractors I talk to when we do a community-wide. Love working with you, Zach. You know, you're like the #1 guy they like to work with. So just want to let you know that you do a great job. Everybody's thrilled to be working with you.
I'll be honest, man. I appreciate the work that you guys do too. I mean, I just feel like it's such a good feeling to give somebody a reference and a referral to somebody that you completely trust. It's huge. I mean, that is such a rare thing. But yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you for listening in today. For more tips on this topic, please read our January blog at www.certifiedie.com.